There comes a moment in life that shifts everything. It is not always loud. It is not always dramatic. It does not always arrive with tears or shouting or a final goodbye. Sometimes it arrives quietly. Sometimes it arrives when you stop replying right away. Sometimes it arrives when you no longer explain yourself to people who never really listened. Sometimes it arrives when you choose peace over proving a point. Sometimes it arrives when you become distant, and that is when everything changes, because when you were always around, they could not see how deep your presence truly was. When you were always reachable, they mistook your loyalty for something ordinary. When you were always forgiving, they thought your heart had no limits. When you were always giving, they assumed your energy would never run dry. When you were always trying, they believed your effort was guaranteed. But the day you pulled back, the day you stepped away, the day you stopped pouring yourself into people who only knew how to take, that was the day they finally started to understand. That was the day your true power became visible. Not because you became someone else, but because your absence revealed what your presence had been covering all along. There is a deep truth in how human beings work. People often do not recognize value when it is always there. Familiarity can dull appreciation. Repetition can weaken gratitude. Comfort can create carelessness. A heart that is always open can be mistaken for a heart that will always stay open. A person who always picks up can be mistaken for a person who can be reached anytime, in any way, without respect, without effort, without care. And then one day, when the energy shifts, when the phone stays quiet, when the messages are not answered the same way, when the warmth is replaced by stillness, they panic. Not always because they suddenly became better people. Sometimes because they suddenly became afraid of losing access to what they once took for granted. That is the power of distance. Distance does not create your worth. Your worth was always there. Distance simply exposes how blind others were to it. And this is where many people get life wrong. They think power is loud. They think power is controlling the room, dominating the conversation, winning every argument, proving every point, leaving no doubt. But real power goes deeper than that. Real power is when you can leave room for silence and still feel completely secure in who you are. Real power is when you stop chasing approval from people who are not able to give it honestly. Real power is when you can step back without falling apart, when you can walk away without collapsing, when you can be alone without feeling empty inside. That kind of power is rare. That kind of power is magnetic. That kind of power changes how people see you, because once you stop performing your worth for others, they are forced to see it in its real form. Think about it. How many times did people only realize your importance after you became unavailable? How many times did they only value your care after you stopped giving it so freely? How many times did they only miss your presence after you removed yourself from their daily routine? How many times did they only see your depth after they could no longer swim in it without effort? This is one of the most painful lessons in human relationships. Being deeply important to someone and being deeply valued by them are not the same thing. You can matter to someone and still be treated poorly. You can be loved in some shallow way and still be ignored. You can be admired from far away and still be taken for granted up close. You can be the person who holds everything together and still be the one people forget to thank. And that is why distance becomes sacred. Distance is not always punishment. Sometimes it is wisdom. Distance is not always revenge. Sometimes it is healing. Distance is not always bitterness. Sometimes it is clarity. Distance is not always a sign that you no longer care. Sometimes it is the strongest proof that you finally care enough about yourself to stop bleeding for people who never learned how to hold you gently. Let me speak to your heart right now. There is a version of you that was too available, too forgiving, too patient, too eager to be understood, too willing to explain, too willing to stay, too willing to fix what was never truly yours to fix. That version of you was not weak. That version of you was generous. That version of you was loving. That version of you believed in the goodness of others. That version of you hoped that if you gave enough, listened enough, gave up enough, the relationship, the friendship, the connection, the bond would finally become what you always wanted it to be. But generosity without boundaries becomes self-abandonment. Loving without self-respect becomes self-erasure. Giving without wisdom becomes exploitation. And being constantly available to people who do not value your time makes you invisible in the very places where you are most needed. Then one day, something inside you wakes up. You start answering more slowly. You stop starting every conversation. You stop making excuses for behavior that hurts you. You stop reaching out just to keep the peace. You stop over-explaining your pain to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You stop doing too much in relationships where the other person only knows how to appreciate too little. And that moment is not your loss. That is the beginning of your power. Because when you step back, something amazing happens. The people who were comfortable with your overgiving begin to feel the absence of it. The people who never noticed your loyalty begin to feel the weight of its removal. The people who assumed you would always be there begin to face the emptiness left behind by your silence. And in that silence, they hear the truth they ignored for way too long. They hear the truth that you were the one keeping things alive. They hear the truth that your presence made the space warmer, safer, more meaningful. They hear the truth that you were not just there. You were the energy, the care, the attention, the steady hand, the emotional structure. They hear the truth that without you the dynamic is colder, emptier, and far less certain than they ever imagined. And suddenly they realize your true power. Not because you forced them to, not because you begged them to, not because you explained it one more time, but because distance has a way of revealing what closeness can hide. People reveal themselves when they have access to you, but they also reveal themselves when that access is taken away. Some will come closer with honesty. Some will only come closer because they miss the comfort you provided. Some will come closer because they love you. Some will come closer because they fear losing what you represented in their life. And this is where wisdom becomes necessary. Because not every return is real change. Not every apology is growth. Not every "I miss you" is love. Not every sudden interest in your life is proof of genuine care. Sometimes people only value you once the convenience is gone. Sometimes they only respect you once they can no longer use your consistency as a guarantee. That is why your distance must be sacred, not emotional chaos. You do not become distant to manipulate. You become distant to reveal. You become distant to see clearly. You become distant to hear what the noise was hiding. You become distant to find out who truly sees you, who truly values you, who truly misses your soul, and not just your labor. And when that clarity comes, it can hurt. Because now you know. Now you know who was building with you. Now you know who was just benefiting from you. Now you know who only loved your presence when it was convenient. Now you know who appreciated the light but not the source. Now you know who was attached to the comfort but not the depth. Now you know who only understood you when you disappeared. But even pain has a purpose. Pain can either make you bitter or make you brilliant. Pain can either make you chase harder or stand firmer. Pain can either make you resent yourself for caring too much or teach you how to care with wisdom. The deepest lesson is not to become cold. The deepest lesson is to become conscious. Do not punish every person because some people were careless. Do not close your heart forever because some people mishandled it. Do not mistake discernment for emptiness. Do not confuse boundaries with cruelty. A strong person does not stop loving. A strong person stops offering sacred energy to places that repeatedly prove they cannot honor it. That is maturity, that is self-respect, that is inner authority. And inner authority is the real power that great psychology often points toward. The journey of becoming whole, becoming conscious, becoming less controlled by the outside world and more rooted in the truth of the self. Because when a person is not yet whole inside, they become dependent on outer approval. They need constant reassurance. They need constant validation. They need constant contact to feel real. But when a person becomes inwardly anchored, they can sit in silence without losing themselves. They can step back without panicking. They can be misunderstood without falling apart. They can be alone without feeling abandoned by life. That is power. And when you began to distance yourself even a little, you may have expected sorrow, confusion, maybe even loneliness. But what you discovered was even more revealing. Distance gave you sight. Now you could see who genuinely cared. Now you could see who only responded to your availability. Now you could see who respected you when they had to work for your attention. Now you could see who wanted your energy, but not your boundaries. Now you could see who loved your usefulness more than your personhood. And when you saw it, maybe it shook you, because once you see clearly, you cannot unsee it. A person can survive pain if it stays vague, but clarity cuts deep. Clarity says this is what it was. Clarity says this is what it became. Clarity says this is what they were willing to lose. Clarity says this is how much your presence meant when it was no longer easy to have. But do not mourn this revelation as though it were only loss. It is also freedom, because every time someone reveals their true nature, they are doing you a favor. They are saving you from spending another year, another month, another day, feeding a connection that survives only on your sacrifice. You do not need to keep watering dead ground. You do not need to keep proving your value to people who understood it only after you withdrew. You do not need to return to the role of emotional servant, energetic provider, silent healer, constant giver, endless forgiver. You are not here to be consumed. You are not here to be taken for granted. You are not here to live as an endlessly available resource. You are here to live as a conscious, dignified, deeply valuable human being. And when you begin to act like that, everything changes. Your voice changes, your posture changes, your choices change, your energy changes, your standards change, your relationships change, your life changes. Because once you stop begging to be chosen, you finally become someone worth choosing with intention. Once you stop making yourself easy to access, you become difficult to disrespect. Once you stop running toward every empty hand, you begin to attract people who know the difference between convenience and connection. Once you stop explaining your worth to the blind, the right people begin to recognize you without a speech. And this is one of life's hidden paradoxes. The more you cling, the more you lose power. The more you release, the more power returns to you. When you were too close, they became careless. When you became distant, they became aware. When you were always in reach, your presence became background noise. When you stepped away, your presence became a memory. And memory is where longing begins. People do not miss what feels guaranteed. They miss what felt alive. They miss what brought warmth. They miss what made their life easier, deeper, safer, fuller. And when that thing was you, they will feel the ache of your absence in ways they never expected. But do not let that pull you into returning to the old pattern too quickly, because there is a difference between being missed and being valued. Being missed means they feel the loss. Being valued means they understand the worth before the loss. Being missed can happen after damage. Being valued prevents damage. Never confuse the two. Some people only notice a treasure after it has been buried. But your life is not meant to be a buried treasure waiting for someone else's regret to uncover it. Your life is meant to shine while you are still here. Your love is meant to be received while you are still giving it. Your energy is meant to be honored while you are still offering it. Your heart is meant to be protected while you is still open. And if a person cannot handle that, then they are not ready for the depth you carry. The strongest people are often the ones who learn to be misunderstood. They learn that not everyone deserves access to their inner world. They learn that explaining themselves over and over to the wrong people is a form of self-betrayal. They learn that peace matters more than being right in the eyes of those committed to misunderstanding. They learn that it is better to be quiet and whole than loud and broken. They learn that distance can save them from the slow death of overexposure, and overexposure is dangerous, because when you reveal too much of yourself too quickly to the wrong people, your uniqueness becomes ordinary in their eyes. Your kindness becomes expected, your loyalty becomes assumed, your patience becomes exploited. Your vulnerability becomes studied by people with no intention of holding it safely. So when you go distant, it is not because you are playing games, it is because you finally understand what not to give away for free. You understand that mystery is not deception, mystery is protection. You understand that privacy is not rejection. Privacy is preservation. You understand that not every thought needs to be spoken, not every wound needs to be displayed, not every emotion needs an audience. And when you live from that deeper understanding, you become harder to manipulate, harder to drain, harder to confuse. That is why your distance is powerful, because it stops the performance, it stops the access, it stops the assumption, it forces a new reality. Now the others must deal with the version of you that no longer overshares, the version of you that no longer does too much, the version of you that no longer saves people who refuse to save themselves, the version of you that no longer confuses love with self-sacrifice, the version of you that no longer rewards inconsistency with endless patience, the version of you that no longer hands out unlimited chances to people who only need one more opportunity to disappoint you. And in that new reality, their feelings become more honest, their intentions become more visible, their respect becomes measurable, their effort becomes undeniable or absent, their love becomes action or it becomes noise. This is why distance is a teacher. It teaches them what you meant. It teaches you what they were willing to lose. It teaches everyone involved what was real and what was only assumed. But maybe the deepest lesson of all is this. Your true power was never in how much you could give before collapsing. Your power was never in how much pain you could absorb while staying present. Your power was never in how long you could tolerate emotional neglect before calling it love. Your power is in your awareness. Your power is in your ability to see through illusions. Your power is in your willingness to leave what diminishes you. Your power is in your courage to become less accessible to what does not honor you. Your power is in your self-respect. And self-respect is something the world notices. At first, some will resent it. Then they will test it. Then they will challenge it. Then they will quietly admire it. Then, if they are mature enough, they will adapt to it. And the ones who cannot adapt were never meant to stay. Let that truth settle deep in your chest. You are not difficult for wanting consistency. You are not cold for wanting give and take. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. You are not arrogant for expecting respect. You are not cruel for stepping back from what hurts you again and again. You are not too much. You are simply too available to people who were too little. And once you realize that, you stop apologizing for your standards. You stop shrinking your boundaries. You stop calling your sensitivity a problem. You stop calling your clarity a flaw. You stop asking for permission to protect your own heart. Because now you know that your heart is not a public space. It is a temple. It deserves reverence, not random entry. And when you treat your heart like a temple, the energy around you changes. You no longer chase what is indifferent. You no longer beg for attention from people who only notice absence. You no longer confuse pursuit with worth. You no longer read distance from others as proof that you are unlovable. Instead, you understand something deeper. The right people do not require you to disappear before they see your value. The right people do not need to lose you to appreciate you. The right people do not wait until you are silent to understand your voice. The right people feel your worth while you are still standing right there. The right people respect your boundaries without resentment. The right people are not confused by your standards. The right people do not make you perform to earn basic care. The right people do not become interested only when your absence creates discomfort. They see you, they honor you, they meet you. And that is why you do not need to build your life around the attention of those who only wake up when you withdraw. You were never meant to be a lesson for people who refuse to learn. You were never meant to be drained so others could realize they had taken you for granted. You were never meant to suffer in order to make someone else grow up. Your role is not to remain small so others can feel big. Your role is to become whole. And when you become whole, you become harder to control. You become harder to guilt. You become harder to manipulate with silence, with affection, with sudden regret, with promises made from fear of losing access. Because once your inner world is stronger than the outer pressure, you become free. Freedom is the final stage of this transformation. At first, there is pain, then there is distance, then there is clarity, then there is power, then there is freedom. And freedom sounds like this. I no longer need to be everywhere for everyone. I no longer need to explain why I am stepping back. I no longer need to prove the value that my absence already revealed. I no longer need to audition for love. I no longer need to beg for respect. I no longer need to remain available to be used. That is a powerful way to live. That is the sound of an unbroken spirit. And when a person reaches that place, they stop being controlled by fear of being left. They stop being enslaved by the need to be chosen. They stop being driven by the panic of being replaced. They stop measuring their worth by how quickly others reply. They become still. They become centered. They become clear. And in that clarity, they begin to attract a different kind of world. A world of give and take. A world of maturity, a world where love is not confused with dependency, a world where presence is not mistaken for permission, a world where silence is respected, not punished, a world where distance is understood, not insulted, a world where value is felt before it is lost. But even if that world is not fully around you yet, you can begin to live as though it is. You can begin to honor yourself before others learn to. You can begin to choose what heals you instead of what merely entertains you. You can begin to stop settling for emotional crumbs and calling it a meal. You can begin to walk away from people who only wake up when they risk losing you. You can begin to become the kind of person whose absence speaks louder than your presence ever had to. And when that happens, do not be surprised if some people suddenly remember your name, your softness, your loyalty, your strength, your patience, your kindness. Do not be surprised if they begin to ask questions they never asked while you were there. Do not be surprised if they suddenly feel regret. Do not be surprised if they act like they just discovered your value, because in a sense they did. They discovered it too late, but you do not have to live in their timing anymore. You do not have to wait for someone else's realization to confirm your worth. You do not have to remain where you are unseen just because others are slow to understand. You do not have to keep offering your soul to people who only appreciate your shadow. You can move, you can withdraw, you can choose, you can rebuild. You can become distant from what drains you and close to what strengthens you. And that, in the end, is the meaning of power. Not domination, not noise, not performance, not begging, not pleasing. Power is self-possession. Power is emotional independence. Power is inner authority. Power is the ability to leave what is familiar when it is no longer faithful. Power is the ability to love without losing yourself. Power is the ability to be missed without returning to being misused. Power is the ability to stand in silence and still know exactly who you are. So if today you find yourself distant, do not shame yourself. If today you feel the ache of stepping back, do not assume you are becoming cold. If today you are less available, less explainable, less emotionally open than before, it may be because your spirit is finally protecting itself. And maybe that is the most beautiful thing of all. Because sometimes the distance that hurts others is the same distance that saves you. Sometimes the silence that confuses them is the same silence that heals you. Sometimes the step back that makes them panic is the same step back that restores your soul. And sometimes, just sometimes, your absence becomes the mirror that forces the world to see what it was blessed to have. Never underestimate what happens when a person who has been overgiving finally chooses themselves. That is not the end of their power. That is the beginning of it. That is the moment the world starts to realize that the person they thought would always stay was never powerless at all. They were simply kind. They were simply patient. They were simply giving too much to the wrong hands. But once they went distant, once they stepped away, once they stopped feeding what did not feed them back, everybody began to see it. The true strength, the hidden depth, the quiet dignity, the unspoken command, the real power. And may you too reach that place where your silence is not emptiness but authority, where your distance is not fear but wisdom, where your absence is not loss but revelation, where your self-respect is not negotiable but sacred. Because when you honor yourself like that, people may still miss you, people may still regret you. People may still rush to understand you too late, but you will no longer need their late realization to know your worth. You will already know, and that is the final victory. That is the deepest power. That is the truth they realized when you went distant.